On today's episode, I am excited to be joined by Dr. Alexandra Stockwell. She is a medical doctor, a luxury love and intimacy mentor, known as the Intimacy Doctor. She specializes in showing couples how to build beautiful, long lasting, passionate relationships. She is the best-selling author of Uncompromising Intimacy and host of the highly acclaimed The Marriage Podcast. A wife of 25 years and mother of 4, Alexandra believes the key to passion and fulfillment, intimacy, and success isn't compromise, it's being unwilling to compromise. Because when both people feel free to be themselves and know how to love and be loved for exactly who they are, the relationship is juicy, nourishing, and deeply satisfying. Alexandra, welcome to Monetize the Mic.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
So I'd love to kick off and just hear a little bit more about your story. How did you go from being a medical doctor to a relationship coach, someone who's an expert in intimacy from the bedroom to the boardroom?
It really depends on where I am, what my answer to that is. And the main reason that I say that is that I really think, especially when it pertains to relationships, but whenever we make any important transition or evolution, we can tell the story on this channel or that channel, and they're very different stories, and they're both really true. And I just want to kind of layer in a little bit from each of the perspectives in which I tell my story. So, the most straightforward, which is the story I tell if I'm specifically speaking with entrepreneurs, for example, is when I was in my mid 30s, I had a small holistic medical practice north of Boston, and I had worked really hard to get there. I had worked in college, in medical school, in residency. I was married. We had 3 of our 4 children. I had paid off all of my medical school loans, and really everything that had propelled me forward in terms of my ambition, I could check it off the list. And yet I didn't have that feeling of having arrived, being satisfied, enthusiastic to live that same way for another 3 or 4 decades. And so people now ask me, well, was I burnt out? No, there's this massive epidemic of physician burnout. This is in 2005, and I did not feel burned out. I just knew that I was going to end up there. And so I dialed things down and took a sabbatical, really to give myself room to do things for no good reason, to do things that weren't a way to go from wherever I was to achieve my goals. I just did things because they felt good, which really was radical for me. I still had my 3 children, was running my household. It's not like I had all day to eat bonbons and listen to the birds sing, but I took a dance class. I sat by the creek. I didn't need a reason to do things. And that made space for other aspects of my soul to emerge, which eventually led me down the path of becoming a relationship and intimacy expert. Okay, so that's one story. The other story, which is much more personal, is that during this time that I've just described, my daughter turned 9. She's my oldest child. And on her 9th birthday, she was vibrant and full of joy and feminine expression and just so happy. And on the one hand, I was thrilled. I felt so grateful to have mothered her in a way that she could just feel so wonderful. And on the other hand, inside, I was freaking out because at that age, my parents were getting divorced. And I just saw that I had disconnected from my own joy, my own sensual ease and expression. And I wasn't depressed at all. I smiled, I laughed, I had a good life. But I just saw in that moment that I had disconnected from an aspect of myself. And I really wanted to reconnect. And quite frankly, it wasn't so that I could have more delight and more erotic, just juiciness. That wasn't my motivation. My motivation was, as a mother and someone who knew child development well, I knew that if I didn't figure this out, there was no way that my daughter could live at home with me another 9 years without dialing down her own vibrancy to match my vibe. And so, on the one hand, I had this personal kind of wake up call, which was totally subtle. Everything looked fine on the outside, but inside it was very deep. And on the other, I had this, what I'll call a professional wake up call, where I realized I needed more. I needed more of me. And that took me down a very intricate and non sequential path to where I am now.
Yeah, I hear that a lot with coaches and service providers, that the service they're providing and the business that they have really came out of a personal breakthrough, a breakdown followed by a breakthrough, a personal realization that they said, "Oh gosh, now I have to help other people with this." So, since this is a business podcast as well, I would love to hear how you got your first couple of clients, right? So you had that realization, you had that calling. How did you actually make the business come together?
It's a great question. And my answer really is by accident. I'm going to give an answer, but it's not anything that is easily replicable because it was so
Mhm.
unconscious. It really, in the entrepreneurial world and in the world of coaching, we know that mindset is really important. And in a way, it was just 100% unconscious mindset. And what I mean by that is that I actually, following the breadcrumbs related to what I was just saying, ended up in a training. It was a pretty intense training on sensuality and sexuality. And I did it because I wanted to be having more gratifying sex, deeper connection with my husband. We've been married for 25 years. This was maybe halfway there. And I really was motivated for my own growth and gratification. However, this program was both for people who wanted to take it for themselves, and it doubled as a coach training. And at the time, I didn't know what a coach was, but I'm a student, I'm a good student. And so I thought, well, let me just go to the teaching lab and see, what are they actually covering here? And what is a coach? And so I went to this lab and I just loved it. And I felt like I'd come home, and that so much of what I loved about medicine would be possible for me as a sex and intimacy and relationship coach. So somehow, when people heard that I was in this training, or my classmates just met me, they didn't know I was a doctor, they didn't know I was married, they didn't know I had children. It wasn't something I revealed because this was a pretty edgy training and there was nobody going home to a white picket fence besides me. But people would just ask me to coach them. And so I said yes. And what I mean to say, it was a very profound lesson for me, is that people didn't know any of the details of my life. They didn't know any of my expertise. They just knew that I was learning to coach in these realms of relationship and sensuality. And invariably, they would want exactly what I had expertise in. So, really, I remember when I charged my first client, and then I just started turning up the pricing, but I didn't effort at all. It really was people responding to who I am without having any of the conscious, tangible information or resume to go with their experience.
I love that you said you didn't effort at all. I think that's such an important lesson, that there was no push. It seems like it was very natural. You're like, people asked me, I coached them, then I started charging. And it just seems like there was a lot of ease in that process.
It was fun, it was engaging, and that is correct. Now, I
Hmm.
didn't have any specific financial goals at the time, which I think is
Hmm.
relevant. If I had, I might not have had so much ease. But really, my joy was in expanding my skills and finding out what people needed and doing my best to be able to give it to them. And that really was where my attention was. And people would tell their friends, and they would meet someone on a train and say, oh, you should talk to. And so it was all word of mouth and referral. I was making low multiple six figures before I had a website, because I just was being me, and I
That's
was
amazing.
caring, and I was skillful.
That's incredible. I love that. I want everyone to let that sink in. Low multiple six figures in revenue without a website. I love it. So talk a little bit
Without an elevator pitch, without a business card, without a website. What I had were the relevant skills for serving individuals and couples who want better relationships with themselves and with their partner.
Mhm.
And that is the thing that, let me say it this way. If my expertise were in website design, and you met me at a party or at a networking event or in the bathroom at the movies, and we connected, you wouldn't have any idea what my website design skills actually are. But in my niche, in my area of expertise, it's about connecting and having conversations and building trust, and my being willing to say the thing that is kind of lurking in the conversation, but normally wouldn't be named. There's a way in which my expertise is relevant with that initial conversation. And if people like that initial conversation, they have a lot more information about what I can do for them and their relationship than if I had a more finite, specific skill that wasn't a parenting conversation.
I'm curious how your medical training comes up when you're doing intimacy coaching. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the main way that it came up initially was both as a benefit and very much as a hindrance. So the benefit is that I already was used to having pretty intimate conversations with people. I've seen every body part. I've touched strangers in ways that is not normal as a physician. And really, no client of mine has ever or will ever say something that shocks me. I might be surprised, not see it coming. That's plausible, but they're not going to shock me to a level of discomfort that I can't be there with them, because I just have such a spectrum of experience having practiced medicine for a while. And I have a kind of authority that comes from years and years of clinical practice. And there are a lot of relationship coaches who their voice goes up, they giggle, they get nervous. None of that happens to me. But on the other hand, as a physician, when I listen to someone speaking, I'm in a way discarding everything which doesn't feel relevant and just focusing on what I need to make a diagnosis and have a plan for treatment. And yes, a good bedside manner means that the patient doesn't feel how incredibly focused I am and how I'm screening everything relevant, not relevant. When I started relationship coaching and focusing on intimacy, that was a real limitation and restriction in terms of what was possible in the sessions, because it meant that this area, which is about emotions and what's happening in the moment and following the flow of the conversation, I would initially be too directive, too mentally engaged, or too exclusively mentally engaged. And so I really needed to learn to be present and a lot less controlling in the conversation, in a way that was very challenging and also extremely healing for me.
Love it. That's awesome. Alexandra, where can our listeners connect with you if they feel drawn to have you help them in their relationship and with their intimacy? How can they get in touch?
Well, I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram, easy to find in both places. And my website, alexandrastockwell.com, has all the goods. And really, we haven't gone into it that much, but I want to say that one of the things that I am most excited about and have a unique contribution to is how to have really passionate, dynamic relationships over the long term. Being married or committed 10, 15, 30, 40, 50 years, how to make that really juicy. And so my book, Uncompromising Intimacy, is a very easy read about how to create that kind of a relationship.
Amazing. So tell us your website again. Is it alexandrastockwell.com?
That's it, alexandrastockwell.com.
Easy to spell. Go check it out, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Stockwell.
What a pleasure, Jessica.